What are the best multi-class dedications in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Which ones are they? And are any of these multi-class dedications classless? Yes, the Summoner dedication. I can finally talk about this and no one will disagree with me because this is the worst thing in Pathfinder 2e, and even thinking about it makes me so mad that this is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this video chapter, I'm going to go over what I believe are the top 7 multi-class dedications in Pathfinder 2e. I already did a top 10 archetypes video chapter in what feels like 18,000 years ago, probably because of how terrible things have been in the past 18 months, so take a look at that video if you want to hear about the non-class based dedications for PF2e. Otherwise, stick around to hear my opinions on the best multi-class dedications in this system. At the very least, it'll only be slightly boring, I promise. If you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member, and taking a look at my Patreon. Your support really helps keep this channel alive. So let's grab the Bard dedication so we can start some music. Right, as I've already explained what archetypes are in that previous video chapter I mentioned, which I'll link to. Now, I'll just go over them incredibly briefly before I dive into the list itself. A dedication feat grants you access to an archetype, and for this video, we're specifically just looking at the multi-class dedications. Essentially, you take this dedication feat as a class feat, or if you're using the free archetype variant rule, which lots of tables are, it will take that slot instead, usually at level 2, and it'll give you a few abilities from said class. And then you can start taking more feats as you level up to essentially steal more and more abilities from that class. Do note that rules as written, you cannot take a dedication for a class you currently is. So if you're a fighter, you cannot grab the fighter dedication. And archetypes in general are what I call mini classes, where you sort of get a few minor abilities from the archetypes themselves. Although in this case, I guess the archetypes will be classes instead. And of course, the dedications are never going to be as good as the base class, though some do indeed come somewhat close. Note that you don't really gain any scaling proficiencies or any class features unless you specifically get to choose them as part of that dedication's feat selection. So you can't ever get the +2 to hit from fighter just from nabbing the dedication, so keep that in mind. As for this list, I'm only going to be talking specifically about the multi-class dedications rather than all the archetypes, and the 7 I list in no particular order as ever are my personal top picks, so your mileage may vary. And lastly, bear in mind that most of these dedications are very build specific and some simply won't work for your character concept. After my list, I'll mention 3 runners-up at the end. There's a few dedications in there that I quite liked but weren't just good enough to make it into this list. Right, let's jump into that list. The Bard dedication requires a +2 in Charisma before you can choose it. Really, the Bard is actually one of my favorite classes in the entire system, so it's not all that surprising that the dedication came up in this list for me. However, that's not to say that I'm talking about this dedication because I like the base class. I actually genuinely think the Bard dedication is quite strong. It's not exactly a strong front-loaded dedication. You have to pump quite a few feats and levels into it to actually get anything out of it, as is usually the case with any spellcaster dedications. So when you take the dedication, you gain a spell repertoire with 2 common cantrips from the occult tradition, and you become trained in occultism and performance. You also choose a muse, but you don't really get anything from it otherwise, and your spells are charisma based, of course. Pretty much all the spellcaster dedications come with 2 cantrips, and while that might not sound like a great deal considering it's going to cost you a class feat, just bear in mind that cantrips do heighten automatically. So the cantrips you choose here are always going to be the most powerful, whether you're a main spellcaster class or whether you just take a spellcaster class dedication. More importantly are the feats that you can ultimately take as this dedication. A quick explanation on feats from multi-class dedications, and this is pretty much a universal rule. Once you reach level 4, you can start nabbing feats from the main class your dedication is from, but you're forced to take a feat that limits your selection to level 1 feats initially before you can grab the advanced version, which just treats your dedication level as half for level gated feats. Keep in mind this means that you are only ever at most going to be able to access level 10 feats from your multi-class dedication, which is the biggest downside to taking one of these feats as opposed to just being the class itself. Back to Bard, once you reach level 4, you can, as just mentioned, start nabbing Bard feats like Hymn of Healing, which I think is a really strong heal over time ability, and you can use it out of combat to heal people up too, as it's a focus spell. You could also grab basic Bard spellcasting, which starts to give you proper spell slots. Like all spellcaster dedications, it takes a while before you start gaining proper access to real spell slots, and if you want to actually gain more of these spells, you need to make sure you're increasing your proficiency in occultism, as the Expert Bard spellcasting at level 12 requires Master, and the Master Bard spellcasting at level 18 requires Legendary Occultism. And that's not confusing at all, Paizo. The Expert spellcasting requires Master proficiency, and the Master spellcasting requires Legendary. Nice and simple. Yeah, that was sarcasm. So just make sure you're scaling up your proficiency in occultism or you're gonna miss out. But more importantly than anything and everything in the entire universe is at level 8 you can grab Anthemic Performance, which gives you Courageous Anthem. And that's one of the main reasons you would pick this dedication. And that's because Courageous Anthem is, in my opinion, probably one of the most overpowered abilities in the whole system. I actually counted in my last session that I ran for a group, there were 7 instances of misses that would have been hits if they had Courageous Anthem up, and there are also 3 hits that would have been crits. That's in a singular 4-hour session, just bear that in mind. As Bard is a spontaneous spellcaster, the dedication still actually gains access to signature spells, meaning you get to pick a few that freely heighten. You are quite limited in this. With basic spellcasting, you get to pick one, with expert you get to pick a second, with master you get to pick a third. But still, signature spells are awesome, and it's really cool to even get them with the dedication. You can even start grabbing Muse feats if you grab the Multifarious Muse at level 2, which I guess would be at level 4 because of the half level thing. You can grab this and pick Maestro or Warrior or whatever, and immediately start getting the feats you want from that particular Muse. So you're pretty much getting a subclass here as well. You don't get any of their other effects, but you just gain that one feat. But hey, that's massively worth it for just a single feat. But yeah, the biggest reason picking this dedication, honestly, is just to grab Courageous Anthem. Cantrips are nice, and there's some actually pretty nice Bard feats out there, including Reach Spell, for example. You do get to grab Cantrip expansion as well if you want a couple more cantrips. Bard is definitely one of my favorite casted dedications out there, apart from another that I will mention in this list, and it's absolutely worth your time, especially if you just want to grab Courageous Anthem because it's sort of broken, in my opinion. Next dedication, please. The Champion dedication requires a +2 in Strength and Charisma. This dedication is well known to be incredibly powerful. I actually think they made it slightly weaker in the remaster because of this, but it's still phenomenally strong, and you get most of the abilities that the main class gets as well, which is pretty awesome. Upon picking this dedication, you choose a deity, and you're bound by your deity's anathema. You gain a Champion's Aura and Sanctification if necessary. You choose a cause, and you gain its edicts and anathema, but you don't gain any of the other abilities. You also become trained in Religion and your deity's associated skill, and you get Champion class DC. You become trained in Light and Medium Armor, and if you're already trained in both, then you gain training in Heavy Armor, and whenever you gain proficiency in any type of armor from your base class, but not on Armored Defense, you gain it with the armor types granted to you by this particular dedication feat, though if you get Expert proficiency and an Armored Defense and you're level 13+, you become Expert in that armor type as well. Yes, it's kind of confusing. You get better armor proficiency and it scales, let's just put it that way. So that's all fine and dandy and incredibly long-winded, but what do you actually get from the dedication? Well, you can potentially get extra HP if you need to. If you're playing as a class that only gains 8 HP or lower per level, then you can grab a Champion Resiliency, and each time you grab a champion feat from this dedication, which includes the initial dedication feat itself, you gain another 3 hit points, which is pretty awesome. That means you immediately gain an extra 6 HP upon taking Champion Resiliency. Excellent for one feat. You can, of course, start grabbing class feats, as I've already mentioned, like with Bard, but more importantly, you can also grab Devout Magic, which gives you your Devotion spell, which is Lay on Hands, Shields of the Spirit, or Touch of the Void. Now, that's just really awesome. Being able to get Lay on Hands at level 4, as well as the other stuff I just mentioned, is very strong indeed. I wouldn't say that this dedication is massively front-loaded, but it gives you quite a lot of stuff relatively early on. Lay on Hands is just amazing to grab at level 4 just for a single feat, for example. Even better than that is that once you get to level 6, you can use your Champion's Reaction, and that's just crazy. You're getting the main thing from the Champion class, aside from its amazing armor proficiency scaling, which you're obviously not going to get here, just for a single feat at level 6. You can even grab your Blessing of the Devoted at level 6 as well, allowing you to pick Blessed Armament, Shield, or Swiftness, which also means that once you reach level 16, you could probably grab a second blessing and choose another Blessing of the Devoted. This is such a very strong dedication that it's hard to pass up on, honestly. If you ever want to be able to do Lay on Hands, Shields of the Spirit, or any sort of tanking to improve your shield with Blessing of the Devoted or with the Champion's Reaction, it's just so good. Let's move on though before I have an excitement aneurysm. More deads, please. The Rogue dedication requires that you have a +2 in Dexterity. This one's pretty good at giving you a bunch of extra skills, but also a little bit of extra damage. Upon taking it, you become trained in Light Armor, and you become trained in Stealth or Thievery, +1 skill of your choice, and you become trained in Rogue class DC. So a couple of little bonuses, but the real reason you want to do this is because Rogue just gets a crap ton of really good feats. And once you grab Basic Trickery and then Advanced Trickery, that's going to give you access to some of those feats. As a good example is Nimble Dodge. In my opinion, it's just a really good feat. Reactions give you +2 to your AC. It's just really cool. Mobility is just phenomenal. As long as you're moving at half your speed, you don't trigger reactions. I mean, that's just fantastic. Quick Draw is good. Tumble Behind, make enemies off guard. There's just so many good feats that you can grab pretty quickly upon taking Basic Trickery at level 4. Obviously, Sneak Attacker is pretty good as well. It's not as good as the actual Sneak Attack feature from Rogue, as it just deals 1d4 damage when enemies are off guard and increases to 1d6 at 6th level, but that's basically it. Hey, it's a little bit of free extra damage, nothing wrong with that. Skill Mastery immediately allows you to increase proficiency in one of your skills from Expert to Master and another from Trained to Expert. And you get a skill feat as long as you make the prerequisites, and you can keep selecting this to grab more and more skill feats if you want to. And you can do this 5 times, so you can really start to max out some of your skills. It's kind of crazy. At level 10, you can get the Deny Advantage class feature, which means you're not off guard to enemies that are equal or low level to you, and you can even get Evasiveness at 12, which increases your reflex saves to Master. It's such a strong dedication, basically all the way through. Rogue generally gets some really interesting feats along the way, and being able to nab some of the class features from this main class, even if they're not quite as good as the proper ones, is still kind of amazing. You don't don't have to be a sneaky, thieving character to take some of these abilities. Mobility in general is just kind of fantastic. So many ways to utilize this dedication, and I highly recommend it. Less sneaking, more divining, please. If you know anything about PF2E and Exemplars, then you knew this one was coming. The Exemplar dedication requires a +2 in strength or dexterity, and it is a rare dedication, so keep that in mind. There's a good reason for that. Upon taking this dedication, you immediately gain a single icon, which you can do your Spark Transcendence with, and you even gain the Imminence part of it as well. And that's what makes this dedication incredibly front-loaded and extremely strong. There's a bunch of icons that have decent Imminence, and for those who don't know, Imminence is like a passive effect, and you have to Spark Transcendence, which has varying action costs to properly activate a sort of specific ability with them. But honestly, the Imminence itself is really good because it is literally just passive. It's just there. You always have it on. You have one icon, you pick one with a really good Imminence, and you just have it permanently. And I found a lot of players try to do just this. Some of the best ones are going to be the Victor's Wreath, which has you and all your allies and 15-foot emanation gain a +1 status bonus to attack rolls. And remember that this is a permanent thing. It's just on. You pick this one feat and it's there forever. You now have a permanent +1 status bonus to attack rolls. I cannot emphasize how powerful this is, to the point where I'd say it's probably too good. Like maybe Paizo should come and have a look at this and maybe rebalance this. I get that it's rare, but rare doesn't mean overpowered, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the icons, as there's quite a lot, but suffice to say, there's some slightly overpowered and potentially game-changing imminent abilities you can grab from them. Exemplar also has the resiliency feat again, grabbing you extra health if you only have 8 from your base class, and of course you can start grabbing basic glory and advanced glories, which are the feats for Exemplar. At level 10, you can get Exemplar expertise, which increases your class DC to expert, which is good for using your icons and their effects, and you can even grab a second icon at level 12. And some examples of feats that are incredibly strong, only the worthy is really fun. It's kind of like Mjolnir, placing your weapon or item or icon or whatever on someone that's unmovable effectively. Through the Needle's Eyes, 2 actions, makes the enemy blinded. I even like Leap the Falls because it gives you powerful leap and quick jump. There's just a bunch of really powerful feats in here for you to grab at some point, and it's just generally incredibly powerful dedication, mostly because of the imminent icon more so than anything. Definitely check with your GM on this one, and if you're going to pick it, try to have a valid reason for it. I know it's tempting because of all the really awesome bonuses it comes with, but make sure it fits your character concept because they are being given a divine spark after all. Moving on to the strange and esoteric. The Psychic dedication requires a +2 in Intelligence or Charisma. This one is incredibly front-loaded, but we'll get to that in a second. When you pick Psychic dedication, you become trained in Occultism, you gain a Conscious Mind and a spell repertoire with 1 standard Psy cantrip from your Conscious Mind. You also gain a Focus Point as well immediately, and you're trained in Occult spell rolls and Occult spell DCs, and you have to pick Intelligence or Charisma for your spellcasting abilities. What this means is that upon taking this dedication, you grab your Conscious Mind, which gives you access to a few amped cantrips, though you can only pick one, and you can immediately amp it as part of your choice, meaning that you gain a focus point and you can amp up the cantrip using this focus point. So first of all, if you just want an extra focus point, then this is pretty good to grab that. But second of all, amped cantrips can be really strong. The shield cantrip, for example, from the Tangible Dream Conscious Mind is really awesome as it has multiple layers and you can target an ally with it. I like the guidance version here because when amped, it becomes a reaction that can turn a critical fail on an attack roll, perception check, saving throw, or skill check into a normal fail, which is really awesome. Warp Step is really great from the Unbound Step because it gives you a +10 status bonus to your speed, and when you cast the amped version, it's just one action and you get to move twice with that +10, which is crazy. These spells are just really good. There's obviously a bunch of other cantrips in here, which I'm not going to go over because that's just the Psychic class in general. Obviously, you can start taking spells from Psychic itself with Psychic spellcasting, basic Thought Form if you want to start grabbing some of the feats. The feats aren't amazing for Psychic, but they're pretty good. I'd just say generally this is a very front-loaded dedication. At level 6, you can grab Psi Development, which allows you to grab either the unique Surface Psi cantrip from your Conscious Mind or the standard one you didn't take, and you also get another Focus Point, which is really cool. You probably want to grab some feats from this dedication and jump out as soon as you are able, but it's very strong if you're after focus points and a really cool cantrip or two. What's up next? The Commander dedication surprised me. This requires that you have an intelligence of +2 and that's it. Once you take this dedication, you immediately gain a folio from the Commander class with 2 common mobility or offensive tactics of your choosing. You get to prepare one of them whenever you're able to prepare tactics, and you get a banner with a 30-foot aura. You don't get the will save bonus to DCs for fear effects, but you are trained in Commander class and Warfare lore, which is pretty cool because Warfare lore is very strong for a lore skill. So first of all, Commander is a pretty new class to the system, and it's a very strong one in my opinion. It's all about supporting your allies, and this dedication gets a lot of those benefits as well. The one thing it doesn't get is, normally with Commander, you instruct your allies to do a thing, and they spend a reaction doing that thing, and then you get to designate one person to get the reaction back. You do not get that with this dedication. That's the biggest downside to picking this dedication versus the main class. But still, getting a couple of tactics is pretty awesome, but even more awesome than that is at level 4, you can grab basic field training, which gives you a feat. And if you grab plant banner, then each ally within a 30-foot burst centered around your banner immediately gains 4 temporary hit points plus an additional 4 at 4th level and every 4 levels after that. So for 1 feat and 1 action, you get to plant your banner and all your allies will gain a decent amount of temporary hit points. Like, that's not even a tiny amount. It's rather solid, and it's just 1 action and 1 feat, and that's it. And while your banner's planted, you don't have to plant it again. Your allies just keep getting that temporary health as long as they're in the radius of it. And every time your allies start their turn within the burst, they get those temporary hit points renewed again, and enemies can remove it, but it's going to cost them an action, which means you're potentially taking an action from enemies as well. It's all really, really strong for just like 1 or 2 feats. You can increase how many tactics you get with Tactical Excellence at level 4, which has another version at level 8 for more tic-tacs. I'm not even going to start on the feats you can have from the Commander class itself, because this class is filled to the brim with good ones, from free recall knowledge checks to getting an animal companion with your banner on it. The Commander is just an amazing class, and the dedication is too. I'm going to stop gushing and move on to our last class. The Inventor dedication requires an intelligence of +3 and it is uncommon. Upon taking it, you become trained in crafting and Inventor class DC, you gain the Inventor skill feat, which is nice, and you get to pick an innovation. You don't gain any other abilities from your innovation, such as Explode, but you do get the innovation itself, and this is another front-loaded dedication, especially if you pick the Construct innovation. And the reason you pick the Construct innovation is because as far as companions are concerned in this system, it's basically the best one. It has higher AC and a bunch of higher stats, and because it's a Construct, it has a bunch of immunities and the like, which makes it better than an animal companion. And I know some people don't really like having companions, but just bear in mind, as I said time and time again, that this thing can body block, they can flank, they can attack, and when you start grabbing some of the feats to make them more independent, where they effectively get an action for free every turn, well, I mean, they get an action for free every turn. How is that not amazing? At level 4, you can grab the basic breakthrough feat, and you can nab a couple of little things such as explosive leap or built-in tools, haphazard repair, etc. Brilliant Crafter is awesome as well, as it automatically scales your crafting once you get it immediately, which makes you an expert in crafting. At 7th level, you're a master, 15th, you're legendary, as well as increasing your Inventor class DC to expert. Realistically, though, you're going to want to nab that basic breakthrough feat pretty soon so that you can get advanced breakthrough, as at level 8, this will allow you to take advanced Construct Companion, which gives it that free action every turn. And at level 6, you can grab Explosion, which is the explode action, which is just an amazing martial area of effect that the Inventor gets. So yeah, it's a pretty front-loaded dedication, but it does have some little benefits later on as well. Absolutely a dedication worth your time, especially if you want another companion on the battlefield that's going to be pretty powerful pretty early. And that's the list of my top multi-class dedications, but let's have a very brief look at my runners-up. Guardian gets a bunch of really cool things, and I actually think it's a fantastic dedication to grab. You can even grab things like Taunting Strike, it has resiliency in there, you can get the Intercept action, and Armored Resistance gives you physical damage resistance. I just think that Champion's a slight bit better, because Champion's reaction is just amazingly good. I like the Alchemist dedication as well, as it comes with a bunch of versatile vials and gives you crafting skills and all that sort of stuff. Never a problem having extra consumables on the battlefield or outside of fights to heal up between encounters. It's just an all-round really cool archetype, just not quite good enough to make it into my list. As a personal choice, I like the Fighter dedication, just because I think Fighter's got some amazing feats. Plus it comes with that resiliency thing once again. It just didn't quite make it on the list. I think Rogue is slightly better for feats, plus the whole skill thing. And that's your lot. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope looking at my list will help you pick your next dedication. I think the multi-class dedications are probably a little bit more powerful than most of the archetypes out there. There's definitely some that are really good, but I did have to separate these particular multi-class ones from my original archetypes video because it would have been mostly covered with these particular selections, which would have made it kind of a boring video. If you have any suggestions for top multi-class dedications, your reasons why, please let me know in the comments, and also let me know if you're aware of any cool feat selections from the ones I listed that I'm not aware of. But that'll do it for this video chapter. Please allow me a moment to thank my archivists and members: Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Nikola Milenkovic, Kyle Travis, and patrons and archivists Clash and Hugh. But for now, this is Dominic of the Nomicon, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.